New Trump tariffs face lawsuits as businesses warn prices could rise.
President Trump's newest tariff wave is already facing legal and business blowback. The administration has imposed new duties on imports from 60 economies, saying those governments failed to impose and effectively enforce bans on goods produced with forced labor. The U.S. Trade Representative says the action was taken under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, at Trump's direction. A Reuters report says the tariffs include new 10% and 12.5% duties on goods from many trading partners, arriving just as an earlier temporary global tariff expired. This story has two sides. On one side, the Trump administration argues that forced labor is a serious global trade problem, and that countries must be pushed to enforce their own bans. The administration says the tariffs are designed to punish governments that fail to stop goods made with forced labor from entering global supply chains. On the other side, businesses and critics argue that the new tariff structure may be too broad, too expensive, and too legally vulnerable. The Guardian reported that plaintiffs challenging the latest tariffs argue the administration needs more detailed country-specific findings to justify the duties. The legal tool matters. Section 301 has been used before, including during Trump's first term against China. It allows the U.S. Trade Representative to respond to unfair trade practices after investigation. The administration is now using that tool to argue that weak forced labor enforcement by foreign governments harms U.S. interests. USTR says final action was taken after investigations into 60 economies, and the agency invited public comments before the decision.
Why are companies and legal groups challenging this?
They are questioning whether the administration built a detailed enough record. If you impose tariffs across dozens of economies, courts may ask whether the findings are specific, supported, and tied to the actual goods being taxed.
For consumers, the concern is simple. Tariffs can raise prices. Importers pay the duties when goods enter the country. Sometimes, companies absorb the cost. Sometimes, they negotiate with suppliers. Often, at least part of the cost moves downstream to wholesalers, retailers, and eventually shoppers. That means tariffs framed as foreign policy can become a kitchen table story when prices rise on clothing, electronics, household goods, tools, car parts, furniture, and business supplies.
A product enters the U.S. The importer pays the duty. The importer adjusts margin or raises wholesale price. Retailers decide whether to absorb or pass along the increase. Consumers may see higher prices or fewer choices. Businesses may delay purchases or shift sourcing.
The administration's argument is that the price pressure is justified if it forces cleaner supply chains and punishes forced labor. But businesses say broad tariffs can punish companies even when they are already trying to screen suppliers. Smaller importers are especially vulnerable because they have less pricing power and fewer sourcing alternatives. A large multinational may shift production to another country. A small retailer may not have that option. A manufacturer that relies on a specific imported component may face immediate cost pressure.
What happens when tariffs hit your inventory?
We either raise prices, cut orders, or accept lower margins. For a small business, all three options hurt. There is also a diplomatic angle. Brazil has rejected the Trump administration's claim that it failed to enforce forced labor rules, calling the new U.S. tariff on Brazilian imports arbitrary and unjustified, according to Guardian coverage. That matters because tariff fights rarely stay one-sided. Countries can retaliate. They can challenge the U.S. at trade bodies. They can delay cooperation in other areas, including immigration, energy, minerals, agriculture, or security. For Trump, politically, tariffs are central to his economic brand. He presents them as leverage. He says they protect American workers, punish unfair practices, and bring manufacturing back. Critics say they often operate like taxes on import-dependent businesses and consumers. The forced labor framing gives Trump a stronger moral argument than a simple protectionist tariff. but it also raises the standard of proof. If the administration says the tariffs are about forced labor, the evidence must show which countries failed, how they failed, and why the tariff level fits the violation.
What should companies do now?
Map suppliers, document forced labor compliance, review contracts, and model price increases. The companies that wait for the lawsuit to end may be behind the curve. Watch the lawsuits for emergency relief. Watch whether courts pause the tariffs while the challenge proceeds. Watch whether USTR releases more country-specific findings. Watch consumer price data over the next several months. Watch whether affected countries retaliate. And watch small businesses, because they are often the first to feel the squeeze when import costs jump. Trump is rebuilding his tariff wall under a forced labor enforcement theory. The policy may appeal to voters who want tougher trade rules and cleaner supply chains. But the courts will decide whether the legal foundation is strong enough. Businesses will decide whether costs get passed to consumers. And shoppers may decide how much they are willing to pay for a trade war framed as moral enforcement.